So, what's the noise all about? People are always asking me, Doc, what's creating that cracking sound when you push on my back or turn my head or roll my hips over the side of the table? What's the noise all about? Well, in order for me to explain what creates that popping or clicking sound, I first need to go over with you how the joints of the body work, how they're made and how they work. So, in your spine, as you know, you have joints between all the vertebrae, all the bones. And in the spine, the joints are flat. They slide over each other, and they glide, and they rotate over each other, and they line up like shingles on a roof. They overlap one another going down the spine. And when you bend over, one vertebra will glide forward over the other, and when you bend backwards, it glides backwards over the other. And when you twist and you turn, the two joints will either rotate on each other or slide back and forth or side to side. Now the joints are encapsulated, they're sealed. Nothing gets in, nothing gets out. And they're sealed by a capsule of ligaments. These are tough, elastic ribbons, if you will, that hold the bones together. And inside the joint you have fluid, they call it synovial fluid, maybe you've heard that term before. And the fluid helps to keep the cartilage lubricated. The cartilage is that smooth, slippery, soft material that sits on top of the bones that allows for the gliding. And it needs to stay wet inside. That's why it's encapsulated so the synovial fluid doesn't leak out. The fluid gets in there through slow perfusion from the underlying bone. Inside bone, you have blood vessels, and it's delivering blood and oxygen to the bone to keep it alive. And the fluid portion of the bone, of the blood, slowly percolates through the tiny capillaries and works its way to the surface of the bone and perfuses into the cartilage, keeping it moist, keeping it wet, and then perfusing into the joint itself. And that's what creates the synovial fluid. And it's very similar to the fluid that forms, let's say, in your tears, or if you get a blister, that clear, watery liquid that fills a blister. It's pretty much the same type of liquid. So, when I deliver the adjustment, and by the way, the word adjustment is the word we use to describe my maneuvers that creates the sound. Okay, so when I deliver the adjustment, you hear what we call a release. I don't like to call it a pop or a crack because that suggests that the bones are breaking, and that's not what is happening. What's happening is one joint surface releases off the other. Instead of gliding, it creates a temporary gap between the bones, okay, between the cartilage surfaces. So you have this gap, and because they're wet, they make that smacking sound. So what happens is the size of the capsule expands. But because nothing can get in, the pressure that's in the fluid drops very, very quickly. And so if there's any gas that's dissolved in that liquid, and there is gas, it's basically air because it's coming in, again, the fluid is coming from the bloodstream, and the bloodstream is carrying oxygen from the atmosphere, but it's also carrying nitrogen also. Air is made mostly of nitrogen and oxygen, right? So that gas gets in the bloodstream, gets to the joint, it's in the synovial fluid. So if you have this pressure, this fluid that's under pressure now, it's like a bottling plant, soda, right? They inject carbon dioxide gas into the fluid and they keep it under high pressure. So you don't see any bubbles in the soda when the container is sealed, right? It's dissolved in the liquid, in the soda. But if you pop off the lid, the bottle top, all of a sudden the pressure is allowed out. So the carbon dioxide in that fluid comes out of solution and forms a bubble. Well, the same thing happens inside the joint. When I deliver the adjustment, there's a momentarily lifting or releasing of one joint surface off the other. It expands the volume within that enclosed capsule, which creates a tremendous drop in the fluid pressure. So the gases that are dissolved in that fluid come out of solution, and it literally forms a bubble inside the joint. And it takes several minutes for the joint to slowly, well, the joint comes right back together rather quickly and repressurizes that chamber. So the bubble slowly dissolves, that gas in that bubble slowly disappears because it's being redissolved into the synovial fluid, just like the carbon dioxide is injected into the fluid of the Coke bottle. That's why if you ever notice if you should happen to crack your knuckles or your knee clicks when you bend it, have you ever noticed you can't do it again right away? It takes time for that sound to be able to be produced again. And that's because it takes time for that bubble of gas to be reabsorbed back into the liquid. So that's what's happening. Now, why is that beneficial? Why is the adjustment therapeutic? Because when I'm adjusting, I'm looking for areas that are lacking in normal joint mobility. And when we deliver the adjustment, that temporary expansion of the joint capsule increases the mobility of the joint. So that's why when you get adjusted, you feel a greater sense of freedom, because we're giving the joint more range of motion. And that's very therapeutic. It also affects the nerve endings. These joint capsules are highly innervated, thousands of tiny nerve endings that are sending signals to the brain about pain, about motion, about proprioception, which is our sense of where we are, up and down, our position in space, our joint awareness, our body position awareness, all these, our vestibular awareness, coordination, all of these nerve inputs are incredibly important to us in order to be mobile. And so that is the therapeutic value of the adjustment, to create the release, to improve joint dynamics, to modulate the frequency of the firing of the nerve endings in those joints that are sending signals to the brain, which is processing these signals and creating an enhanced sense of function in the body. If you have any questions about what I discussed with you today, don't be shy on your next visit. Ask me, Doc, what did you mean by this? What did you mean by that? I'm happy to go over it with you again. I hope this helps. Have a great day, and I'll see you at your next visit.